Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Lola Gershfeld. Lola to all of you. I'm not sure whether you know who I am. I'm the founder and CEO of EMC Leaders. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is EMC, and it stands for Emotional Connection Process. I developed the Emotional Connection Process, or the EMC, and it is an approach that was created in 2010, which is based on the last 50 years of research, mixture of John Bowlby's attachment theory and adult bonding, Carl Rogers' humanistic theory for creating safety in working with emotions, and a mixture of systemic Salvador Minuchin's theory of interpersonal functioning. We kind of mix the self and the system here, but it is called emotional connection because it was absolutely not acceptable to focus on emotion or use emotion to create change when we started. You had to get people to contain it, to go past it, focus on their cognition, their dysfunctional cognitions, and trick them into a new way of interacting with each other. And it was unfashionable to go directly into emotion. So this is what we do. We sort of do that because we have learned as that when we bring emotion into the conversation, when we help teams to reconnect and repair the relationship at an emotional connection level, everything changes for them. And we have been doing that since 2010. If you'd like to go to our website, emcleaders.com, there are lots of resources that you can find available to look at. If you're interested, particularly to learn more about the EMC, you can read our book, Emotional Connection, the EMC Strategy, which is available on Amazon. And there's lots of also publications available on Amazon. It will give you an understanding of the attachment theory and who we are as human beings and how attachment really applies to our relationships as we work together as a team, as a community, as a tribe. So we are not just social animals, we are bonding animals. And we need to understand the impact we have on each other, the way the way we work together, the way we influence together, and the way we trigger each other. So you can find lots of resources on our website. From our point of view, the emotional connection process is really the gold standard, as far as I'm concerned, in dealing with conflicts, in dealing with disengaged teams, or productivity, or even retention. We have done a lot of work with companies and teams, and in the last few years, we have really been researching ways to bring an active focus on emotion and bonding science, specifically in the field of organizational development. I think you'll get from what I'm saying here is that if you look at work interactions from an attachment point of view, and if you want to improve your team productivity, if you want to improve your company culture, whether you're addressing new issues or old issues, whether you're going through change management or you're going through the restructure, bringing an active focus on emotions and emotion regulations will make a huge difference in your organization. Maybe I should say right off the bat that from the beginning, we have been known to work with traumatized teams. And from our point of view, this approach is particularly suited to working with teams who have been devastating and overwhelming experiences where they have been rendered helpless. And I think there's a lot of research and reasons for that. But two most of the basics ones are attachment and attachment science now gives us a deeper understanding of emotions and what renders people helpless and what the solutions are to that helplessness. So attachment, which is really all about how we deal with our vulnerability and how there's only so many ways to deal with our vulnerability. I think attachment particularly is useful perspective to have when you're looking at teams who have gone through trauma. And of course, anyone who works with trauma has to be actively engaged in helping team members regulate their emotions. I mean, this is one of the core problems, if not the core problems, with managers or teams. And teams include managers, as far as I'm concerned, who really are struggling in working together. Team members are either numbed out, which of course is the most pernicious symptom of trauma, because if you're completely numbed out, you cannot have any corrective healing experiences. You are numbed out. So team members are either numbed out when they are traumatized as a way of dealing with that disconnection, with that injury, with that trauma, or they are hyper vigilant, where they are vigilant all the time for threats and highly aroused, what often means that they have lots of free-floating anxiety and free-floating anger. And you start noticing behaviors in meetings where a manager or a peer becomes attacking or judgmental, shaming, throwing, tantrums type of, so to speak, in front of the group. So please note right there that when you think of those two symptoms, that those two symptoms will actively destroy your team productivity, will destroy creativity, destroy collaboration. It will destroy your team relationships and have a negative impact on your organizational culture. From an attachment point of view, the natural place to heal trauma is not to ignore it or by issuing personal improvement plans or hiring personal individual coaches, which helps into some respect. But I want to specifically say, in terms of team relationships, the most natural place to heal trauma is in the presence of people you depend on, which is your team members, your manager. And so for the things I just said, I think it's not an accident that right from the beginning, we have worked with traumatized team members so much as a team that we've written about it, and it just naturally fits with this approach to doing the training. I think the other reason it fits is that when we teach EMC, and there are lots of resources for learning EMC, in fact, there's an online course that you can take as a team. But one of the things that we teach in EMC is how to go into emotional experiences slowly and safely, how to titrate risks, how to create safety in meetings, how to help team members to talk about emotions in a safe and professional manner where they can tolerate, how to discover that emotion, to distill it and order that emotion. When you order emotion, it becomes tolerable. I'm going to say that again. When you order emotion, it becomes tolerable. And then how to move team members into that corrective emotional experience that we call. This is where the healing starts and continues. And I'm mostly talking about the teams here because that's what I'm most well known for and love working with. If you don't know my work and it sounds rather overwhelming, probably the best way into my work is to read Emotional Connection, the EMC strategy book, which I wrote with my colleague. But the fact that we deal with emotions so actively, the fact that we actively know how to create these new emotional experiences, how to take people into their emotional balance, where you don't have to numb out and you don't have to be constantly agitated and vigilant. And the fact that we know how to create that safe haven relationships in the conversations with teams makes a huge difference, huge impact on team productivity, performance, and the quality of their well-being. Just to give you a snapshot of that, often managers and teams don't understand how they impact each other. And so inevitably, it starts to destroy their comfort in their relationship. So it's almost impossible for them to offer sensitive care and support to the person who is traumatized when it really matters. But can you imagine just a small little snapshot of what can happen when a team is using EMC? And this was an engineering team, in fact, the manager who usually gets frozen during meetings and then feels really ashamed and shuts everybody out for a few days until it happens again. So he is living in isolation. And what attachment theory says is that isolation is inherently traumatizing for human beings. And if you're trying to face the dragon of trauma alone, you're just not going to make it. You're not going to make it. We just don't have the ability to face dragons alone. Our nervous system isn't quite equipped for it. So we're not supposed to be able to do that. So rather than do those things, can you imagine the change in this manager's life when he is able, as a result of EMC training and having these bonding conversations with his CEO and CSO, where he can turn and share what happens to him in meetings. And because they've talked about it in a very structured and tolerable way, and because the CEO and CSO really understand him, they have learned how to tune into each other. They can turn and simply stay present with the manager, holding the space for him. The new experience starts to really emerge, where he knows that when the dragon comes for him, with that feeling comes for him in meetings, he can simply turn to them in a safe way, look, and their presence actually tranquilizes his nervous system. Our key attachment figures who understand us tranquilize our nervous system, which is really the best way and the basic way that our nervous system works. So that's the basis. What we know how to handle emotions is by really co-regulating our emotions with the help of other people. So he can be soothed, and when he attends meetings next time with a memory that he was not alone in the experience, and the memory of returning to that emotional balance, and he has more trust with his CEO and CSO, each time he's able to do that, his relationship, please note, gets stronger. When you help team members face trauma together successfully, their relationship gets stronger. And the person who is experiencing trauma finds that there's a safe place with his team where he can rebalance and re-engage to repair and restore his relationship. So just sort of giving you a snapshot of what we're talking about here. Attachment is really a theory of development and growth. I don't know how much you know about it, but it was only applied to mothers and children for many years. And it only really been actively applied to adults in the workplace since the early of 2000s. But basically, attachment really focuses on the fact that we need other people to constructively deal with our vulnerability. This is bred in our bones. It's not a decision you make per se. It's basically who you are. And that's the only really constructive way to face dragons and demons is with other people holding your space, standing beside you. Soldiers know that. They don't go into battle alone, and they risk their lives for each other daily because they know that this kind of connection with other people is, in the end, the only safety we have. So what attachment does is it gives people a language to their emotions, a language for their attachment needs, for them to be connected at an emotional level. It validates the fact that we're all vulnerable. We are all human beings. There's nothing to be ashamed of. By the way, that's another place where a manager can do something that no trainer or coach can, which is dealing with shame. Shame often comes with trauma. And if you're a really good coach or a really good trainer, you have a small 20-watt light bulb to shine down into that pit of shame that somebody is in. Well, I can assure you that a manager, a key attachment figure, even if there's a distressed relationship happening, by the middle of the process, the manager has a stadium floodlight to shine down in that pit of shame. And that changes people. So what we try to do in EMC is we try to help team members understand the dance that they are caught in. We help them understand how losing their emotional connection plays a part in that dance. We help them see how the distance traumatizes everybody, even the people who are observing the interactions and the relationship. That feeling alone in the world is really naturally traumatizing. And we help team members understand moments of disconnection. And then we gradually help them to move into moments of connection and engagement where they don't just heal their relationship, they create a relationship that heals. So I hope it's not too overwhelming of what I'm sharing here. The attachment science really is the basis of EMC. And I think the fact that we use the science is the first time in, I don't know, business history that we have understood bonding emotions and the importance. I want to stress that out. The importance of team connection, team relationships really is the key to our safety in our brain. The science really gives managers and teams a different kind of place to stand in confidence because we have a map. We have a map to people's needs, to what goes wrong in team relationships, and how to put it right. And that's the first time we've ever had that. And what the science says is that traumatized or not, we all get overwhelmed by life. We all feel uncertain and vulnerable in moments. And in those moments, and also generally through our, work life, not just when we are vulnerable, we need that safe haven, a place to go to share our vulnerability, a place to know that people will comfort us and soothe us. And the manager is actually the most effective person to do that, for us to experience it. The manager is really our key attachment figure. The manager is like our parent. We don't want the manager to fix the problem, but we want them to offer the emotional connection, the emotional comfort that we need, which makes the problem for us tolerable. And then we can learn to face the trauma together or the dragon together, so that we need that safe haven and secure base where we can regain our emotional balance and feel not alone. When we are children, we need to hold on to those attachment figures at the time. I mean, you've all seen a mother with a toddler at the playground, and the toddler runs and then comes back to hug the mother and then runs again. So as adults, when we have a secure relationship with our manager, when we have that secure connection with our peers, we can carry that mental image of them around with us. We can turn to those mental images when the disconnection happens for us, or when something gets overwhelming for us. And we can turn to them and use those mental images to soothe our nervous system. And we actually talk to team members about this in meetings, creating places of comfort. One great example was the Allergan board when they had to deal with the hostile takeover, which was very stressful and scary experiences for some board members. To help them regain their emotional balance, they actually met much more often, and where they had meetings where they could express their worries and concerns in a way where they felt heard and understood and felt like they could deal with that stress as a group instead of dealing with it alone. And so every time they would go out in the world, they could feel the connection and the comfort and the support that they needed to actually go through day by day until they resolved this. So what the science says is that when you create experiences where you really get that sense that you are important to each other, you value each other, you care about each other, you know that you matter to each other. And when you know that you have that secure base that allows you to go out in the world and explore, you actually become more separate and more confident in that separateness, because you know that your team, your manager will be there for you. And will be there for you on that emotional level. The attachment also says that there are not so many ways of dealing with problems in relationships when you do lose that connection. It's not a conflict or personality per se. All teams have conflict. All teams have personality differences. The key issue from an attachment point of view in distressed team relationships is emotional disconnection and the lack of emotional balance. So the panic that comes from that emotional disconnection, from a sense of loneliness, loss, and the helplessness that comes with it. Basically, what this approach, it's like a life and death, right? What this approach says is that we don't have many ways of dealing with that loneliness and fear of being lonely. And where we cannot really get that sense of emotional connection with people we depend on, particularly when we are most vulnerable, we lose our emotional balance and we flip into reactive anger, pushing, demanding a response. Like, I'll make you respond to me. I'll tell you all the things you're doing wrong. I'll demand until I get a response from you, because any response is better than none. Or we flip into shutting down and numbing. I don't want to talk about this. There's nothing to talk about it. I can never please you or, measure up to you. So I'm not going to discuss it. So this framework helps us to understand normal team relationship distress. That normal relationship distress is usually exasperated in a team facing a specific trauma or distressful event. From our point of view, this can be anything. It could be reactions from a project delays. It could be technical issues. It could be change management. It could be restructuring, layoffs, relocation. The incident and the consequences of those events can be traumatizing to people, and especially depends on the security of that relationship. If the relationship is secure, all of those change events could be much easier to deal with. But if the relationship is not secure, especially with the management or team members within themselves, those events becomes really traumatized. The evidence is that it ends up getting in the way of team relationship. The team cannot cooperate around new behaviors and adapting to the fact that, one or two people are having a crisis. And so the relationship goes down, the performance goes down, the interactions go down, the communication, everything actually just goes down the hill. And that's more and more or less the same for all kinds of trauma. So attachment helps us to understand what relationship distress is all about and how relationship distress and the ability to keep your balance in the relationship sort of interacts, if you like, with you. Emotional signals organize our interactions. They organize the dance. Emotion is the music of the dance. If you're going to really change the way your team dances together, you have to change that emotional music one way or another. And teaching people to suppress those emotions or bypass it basically just doesn't work. And I'm not just saying it just because I have seen it in my work. I'm seeing it from all the research on emotion and emotion regulation. It just doesn't work. So what we do is we really try to help people shift the way they play their emotional music. And then when you have the new music, you create a new dance with your team. A dance that gives especially the traumatized team members or team member a safe haven and secure base where they can start re-engaging, they start to be more secure in the relationship, and they start to heal from the trauma. When people come together in our experience with trauma, this makes an enormous, enormous, enormous difference in their interactions, in their way of life, in their well-being. I think I had a conversation with somebody a while ago, and they said that their company really wants to improve their retention rate. Well, the most effective way to do that is through improving team connection, especially again with the manager and each other. It is to give them some sort of training and help them to understand what's going on in their relationship, what's going on in their interactions, and help them to learn how to turn to each other in moments of stress, how to be there for each other, how to hold that space, how to talk about emotions, and how to repair the relationship. And then I assure you that when that vulnerability comes up, when they become vulnerable, they can turn to each other, they can turn to their manager, they can turn to their peers, and they would not want to leave the company because they will feel safe. They will feel valued. They will feel like there's somebody there for them. And, this is what all of us want and need when there's fears come up. As Mozart said, love guards the heart from the abyss. Love guards the heart from the abyss. And this is true, particularly for trauma, for team members who are dealing with some sort of relationship injury. But it works whether you have trauma or not. So I just went through attachment theory and science in a flash of light. And so let me talk a little bit about EMC, because so how do we apply this attachment science into working with teams and using the EMC process? So first and foremost, we create safety. A lot of training is about that. We create safety. We see the safety from an attachment point of view, which means that we create an alliance. We assume that we are a surrogate attachment figure, if you will. We don't judge people. We come across as collaborative. We focus on the present. If the past comes in, it's emotionally relevant. We'll deal with it in here and now. But we don't much focus on the past. We focus on the present and how the past turns up in the present and how people cope with it in their habitual ways. So because we are using the attachment framework, we stay with people. We are emotionally present in the training. We are surrogate attachment figures, so we stay with people. We regulate with our empathy, our emotional accessibility and responsiveness. We help people by providing the language for their emotions as they walk into those vulnerable places for their team relationship distress and their trauma history. And the way they dance is very important, because that's how they will shift the dance, is to recognize what do they do to protect themselves, what do they need to feel safe and connected. So we spend a lot of time creating safety, and EMC is not a pathologizing approach. So we focus on what you do now. We don't really focus on what's wrong with you or how you should not do things like that. We don't tell people what to do or what not to do. What we help them is to construct their emotional experience, how to put it together, how to regulate it, how that music plays in them, and how they dance with the teams. And as they become more and more competent in their dance, they start to see that, oh my gosh, is our dance leads us into more connection or safety, or is our dance leads us more into disconnection? So in EMC terms, conflict is just the inflammation. The virus is emotional disconnection. So we always focus on moments of disconnection and moving people into moments of positive connection. The change mechanism is not an explanation. Explanations are interesting, but they don't particularly work when you're falling through space and when you're losing your balance. So we try to take people into new corrective emotional experiences where they can regulate their emotions differently, where they can connect with team members differently. And then the more secure connection becomes, the more they can regulate their emotions. So that's what we usually see in our training sessions, is that folks who have faced the dragon only found one particular ways of dealing with that dragon, with that disconnection, and are stuck in that way of playing their emotional music and dealing with their emotions. And this stuck place is now destroying their relationship, destroying their performance, productivity, destroying their interactions, and it's destroying their well-being. So we call that stuck place a negative cycle trap. It's almost like a trauma trap, because it keeps traumatizing you more and more and more. Because the more you are overwhelmed and the more you've lost your emotional balance and you are in vigilance, panic, and you're always offending off this sense of helplessness, the less you're able to be responsive to your team members, the less emotional balance you will have, the more numbed out and angry you become. and your relationships go down the hill when you need it the most. And as your relationships go down the hill, you will feel more lonely, more helpless, more unsure of yourselves, more shameful, and your behaviors and strategies actually get worse. So you're in a dreadful, toxic dance going on between the inability to deal with emotions. And what that means is you never really create a coherent, constructive, tolerable narrative about the trauma because you're always fending off these difficult emotions. You are doing it alone. So trauma symptoms get worse. Your ability to deal with them gets less, and your team interactions go down the hill. So what we do is we try to stop that trauma trap. First of all, what we do in EMC is we de-escalate. We de-escalate negative cycles. That is stage one in the EMC process. We talk about how the trauma shows up in the relationships. We talk about the dreadful cycles that people get into and how it leaves them alone and isolated. We help them to look at the point where the dance is the problem, not the person, not any specific individuals, not the manager. It's the cycle. It's the cycle, the problem. The fact that the dance is the problem. The fact that they can't cope with the stress is actually creating that dance into a perpetual negative loop. And we help team members get a meta view of what's going on. We help them to step out of the dance, and we help them to do that. And as you start creating enough safety, then you can actually go in and take more risks and learn a new dance of more secure connection. So we structure their attachment relationships. And by the way, if you want to research on that, you can go to our website and look at it. There are a few case studies, and the latest one we did indeed shows that we don't just change, people's satisfaction. We restructure their relationships and make the relationships more secure. And when you have more security in your relationship, you can deal with anything better, including stress, change, uncertainties, vulnerabilities. You can create more coherent sense of your experience, which helps you heal from trauma. As Carl Rogers said very wisely, that health is when you feel confident and worthy. When you feel competent and worthy. When you feel competent and worthy with your own experience. That is what health is. So to give you an example, I worked with a science team. Let's call Sam as he was a science engineering manager. Sam has been withdrawn and disconnected from his team. In the training session, he remembers all kinds of relationship injuries that have been happening between him and the VP, which is not unusual. I mean, we all know what happens when you're not able to communicate with your boss, right? So Sam is dealing with overwhelming emotion by shutting down. And he has been working for this company for about 8 years. Him and the VP have had a pretty good relationship. But there has been a restructure in the company, and Sam has been very hurt by the changes that the VP has made. The VP is a very caring leader and wants to support Sam's in his professional development. But Sam is driving everyone crazy, including the team leader, including the team, because he doesn't want to talk about his experiences. He doesn't want to talk about anything except for the fact that he comes in and he just basically goes around and round and round in meetings, and it becomes very draining. Meetings become long, and he doesn't really know a clear way of talking about it, but he's trying to get the work back. But every time when he goes into meeting, a flashback of shame and humiliation comes over him because of the fact that he was not promoted, and he has been very hurt by it. So when we go into it, it's pretty unclear what is really bothering him at first. But from his point of view, he reached this place where he just feels that the VP doesn't value him. He doesn't care about him and doesn't see him as a very valued member of the team. And as you know, when he joined the company, everything kind of looked good with his relationship with his VP. He was very active in projects. He felt like he could accomplish a lot of things. He felt really significant. Then he realizes that the VP became very demanding, which he found very difficult. Then he found out that another person took the lead in a specific project, and Sam got into a rage. He decided to suppress his emotion. It was very hard for him to do any work, and he became more and more agitated. And that's what the research says, that suppression is really a lousy emotion regulation strategy. It wipes you out. You can't think of anything else other than suppressing emotions, and you become actually more agitated, not less. So he decides to ignore the VP and decides to suppress the emotion because he has work to do and he's responsible. But and he puts it on the shelf and starts to go around the VP. And what comes screaming out in the stressful times is not his experience of not performing, but this incredible memory that the VP, who really looks like a great boss, has appeared to be supportive and encouraging, is really a person who has betrayed him. And he's obsessed with it. So he speaks about it constantly. He flips between being quite verbally enraged and irritated. He gets irritated in the training sessions, and when I slow him down and talk about what's going on underneath all his anger, he gets irritated with me. And he flips into sort of spaced out, numbed out, and then goes into complaining and blaming. So here's the problem. And the problem is you need a map. You need a map, especially if you need for your own safety, right, to create emotional balance for yourself. If you don't have a map, you are going to get off. And especially when you're a manager dealing with distressed team members, you need to know how to stay in balance because they will push you off balance. And the relationship will become chaos for you. The interaction will be chaotic. You will you will spend hours and hours trying to figure out what's happening. Because everything gets escalated and you become exhausted by it. You start to just basically giving up. So the VP was well and open to do the training, and he tried to help him. He tolerated his attacks, but then after a while, the VP would just turn away from Sam and shut down to protect himself. And I mean, that's exactly what happens when you call a kind of like a burned out pursuer, when you just don't know what to do anymore. And when he did that, Sam would say, there you see, there you are, you see, you're not even listening to me. You don't care about me. So you can probably recognize this nice, tight, recurrent pattern that happens in all relationship distress. The helplessness and panic sets in. And it's very recognizable. And I must say that I found Sam pretty difficult at first. To give you an example of how attachment helps me, once I've got past, understanding that this is all about their own helplessness and fear, I help them to recognize their emotions, their fears, their needs. They started to listen to each other more. And the attachment framework really tunes and helps us to tune into that emotional channel. And what I'm able to say to Sam is, could you help me? What you're really telling me is that you've worked with having this fear of not measuring up. And then there was one time in your life when you felt safe and thought that your VP was with you. And then suddenly, from your point of view, something happened that changed that. And that there was no place for you that was safe. And the only way you could deal with that was disengage and avoid your VP. His name is Mike. So you would go around him, which made your job a lot more difficult. You couldn't work, you couldn't sleep. It's like your body started to say to you, is there a safe place? Or am I completely alone in this company? If I called, would there anybody who would answer? Is there anybody who could say, are you there for me? Or am I really, really completely alone? And you check that out, because that's a basic question that we all are asking in our relationships all the time. Are you there for me? Do I matter to you? If I call, will you respond? That's the most basic question of all. Because when we're small, we know if we can call, no one comes, we die. So we know that in our bones. So I say to him, Sam, you come in the morning and you lost that sense of safety. And you say to yourself, I'm not safe. Is there any safety? And you say to yourself, I only have one lifeline, and it's Mike over there in the chair. It's this man, it's this VP who is the only possible lifeline for me. And then your brain says, check, check, be vigilant, because there's danger everywhere. He didn't promote you. So then you start to think, is there a crack in this lifeline? Is there a crack in this lifeline? And you say, yes, there is a crack. Remember the time that he didn't value you in front of others. And you become obsessed with that crack, and you push on it and you push on it to see if you can change it, to heal it, as that you push on it by demanding, being enraged, blaming, complaining. Or you go around him and you say to yourself, he doesn't care, he doesn't value me, he didn't see me valued enough. So you push on it because you need to have that lifeline as a whole. You get so worried about the crack, you get so obsessed with it. And he says, that's right. And it calms him down that I was able to get into that experience with him. I say, okay, if there's a crack in the lifeline, you're completely alone, aren't you? And if there's no point in anything, the dragon is too big, the darkness is too much. And anyway, who cares about the fight if you're completely alone? And he says, I've always been alone, except when I had such a good relationship with Mike. I say, I understand. I've got underneath to his vulnerability. I've changed the emotional music. So then I'm going to use that new emotional music to create a new relationship dance. I say, Sam, could you tell Mike? Could you tell him? I'm so scared that there's a crack in the lifeline. I'm so scared that when we get disconnected, I can't really depend on you. I keep pushing on that crack. So I get scared and I'm alone with the dragon, feeling like I'm failed. And he tells the VP, and he starts to tell him about his sadness and his helplessness, how much he needed that connection for him to thrive, and how he's never allowed himself to say that to another human being in his whole life. And Mike, the VP, responds. He doesn't reason with Sam. He responds to him in a very supportive and comforting way. And he reassures him that he needs him and how much he values him. And so the whole team is watching this interaction happening. They both stand up and give a hug to each other. Getting that connection back is so important for team dynamics. It's so important for teams to thrive, to feel safe with each other. So I'm trying to capture it in a kind of like in a snapshot, because from our point of view, that is the key corrective emotional experience. When they're able to identify what's happening for them, the triggers, the emotions, identify what is really needing them, what's their fear. And what we do is, when they are able to do that, what we create what is called a bonding moment. And we create that bonding moment through reoccurring steps all the time. So the stage of the process can change, the vulnerability can change, and you can slow things down or speed things up. But if you look at the process, we always do the same things again and again and again. What do we do? I'm going to list them for you. We call them EMC moves. So first, we stay in the present process. We stay and reflect what is happening for them. I stay safe. I help team members make sense of the raw spots and emotions. We give them the list so they can feel more competent in their experience. And this calms them down. Excuse me. They feel that they are being heard and understood from the attachment point of view. So I go and I reflect the present process. What is happening for you right now? What is happening for you is you are desperately seeking connection. Because in that moment, you felt not valued. So you're desperately seeking to make sure that the lifeline exists with your VP. That's real. And you're tormented with that idea that it's not. So you push on it, and you say to yourself, he let me down, he betrayed me. And you're desperately trying to fix that and make sure that you want him to persuade you that it's not true. But the more you push, the strategies you use to connect and reconnect actually comes across as attacking. You don't get, you get the other person, the VP, more irritated and aggravated. And then the VP is exhausted and turns away and shuts down. And then you say to yourself, there you are, you see, you're not there for me. So you watch people, they set up these dance that actually confirms their worst fears. That's what they do all the time. So of course, Sam is amazingly insecure in his attachment and his relationship with the VP. So it makes sense why he would respond like that. So you stay with the present process and you show the team the dance that they're caught in on an emotional level. Again, the VP tries to support you, but you don't believe that when he tries. And so you kind of like dismiss his support, you ignore it, and then he shuts down and moves away. He shuts down and you say, there you are, you see, you have abandoned me. You are not there for me. You don't care about me. You don't value me. And then you get angry and you feel more helpless and more desperate and you do it again. So the more you push on him and try to get through this and prove that he is really not there for you, the more you test this out, the more he moves away. The more he moves away, the more alone and helpless and desperate you are. And he says, yes, that's correct. And the VP, Mike, also confirms that it's exactly what's happening for him. So I focused on their inner experience and distilled it for them, put it together and ordered it, and then see how that inner reality creates the dance that they get stuck in. So step one, we clarify and reflect the present process. We reflect it in a way that is non-blaming, non-judgmental, so that people feel safe in a way where they can connect and make sense of their experience to allow them to be more balanced and more present. Step two, we really clarify emotions and fears. At this point, we have a map of all of these emotions. We're not overwhelmed by it. We know sort of what's there. We have a language for it, a structure for it. We recognize their fears and their automatic thoughts and protective behaviors. And also we start to help them to identify their needs. And we work with one person, then the other person, but the team is right there. And we are able to create the reconnection together with them. So we clarify the emotion, we change the emotional music into softer emotions, like sadness, the fear of not being valued, the fear of being rejected, feeling of aloneness, hurt, shame, I can never measure up. And those are basic emotions that are waiting underneath all this anger or frustration and irritation. So you move into the emotion on a different level. And that is step two. Step three, you use the new emotion to create a new dance. You create an enactment, a bonding moment. I say, Sam, can you turn to Mike and share what has been happening for you? And he shares his emotions, his fears, which changes the music. Instead of pushing his way with surface emotion, he shares his vulnerability. So you turn the new music into a new dance. So step four, you process the new step in the dance. Sam, what was it like for you to turn and share your vulnerability, feelings, fears, and needs? What was it like for you to turn and tell Mike about how sad and shameful you have felt since that moment? He gets quiet. He doesn't look like the same guy anymore. He's quiet. He's calm. He says, it feels good. It feels like I've been running all my life. I've been suddenly stopped running. And it feels so good to tell him that. And then I asked Mike, can you take it in? How is it for you to receive this? Because sometimes, when team members share a new message, and even though we know that there's a lot of positive possibilities with it, people are not used to it. And it's that notion, it's better to have the enemy than the stranger you don't know. And so sometimes it's hard. So we stay with it, we help them. So I say to Mike, can you hear him? Can you hear him? What happens for you as you hear Sam says that he has been really scared and shameful since that moment? And he says, I can hear him. I can hear it. And so, and then he says, whether Sam believes it or not, I just realized that the way we've danced together over this last year, where he would get anxious and I would end up shutting down, I'm starting to really understand how lonely he felt in those moments and how that uncertainty of his value has been building up in him. I think that was a very perceptive thing to say for Mike. Not many managers can do that right from the get-go. So it was really incredible. It really touched Sam, and it touched Mike in a very, very deep way. So what happened here is not just Sam's experience coming into this relationship changes. It's both of them changes. What happens in their dance, the way they dealt with their emotions, sent emotional signals to each other, has really perpetuated his uncertainty, his fears, and the way they were dealing with emotions, and for both of them. So because his way of dealing with emotions was to shut down, for Mike, that was a really bonding moment for him. He started to support, they both kind of grew in that moment. They started to send new music to the dance changes. So step one is to stay with the present process. What happens, what they do to respond, what the automatic thoughts, protected behaviors, discovering and distill the emotion and the dance that is happening now. It's the consequences which they are both feeling disconnected and alone. Step two, we deepen emotions, we clarify softer and primary emotions, we understand their fears, and in terms of the image, the bodily sensation, and specifically fears about themselves, about the other person, and the relationship. And step three, we create an enactment. We create this bonding moment using the information with the new music. We create that the opportunity for them to tune into each other, to turn to each other, and share that vulnerability with the new music already. Step four is we process the new step. We say, Sam, when you we process this new step so they can really share what's happening for them. And so Mike was able to say, Sam, when you tell me about your sadness, all I want to do is to be there for you. I want to support you. I value you. You're important to me, Sam. And all I wanted to do is to build this company with you. So that was an incredible new message, that they have this moment of connection. And this is what happens in EMC. You get these moments over and over and over and over again. So when they can exit the negative cycle, so that the way they deal with emotion changes. And the trauma comes in. The trauma is dealt with more constructively, with more focus, with a clear direction on how you get out of trauma. How do you heal the trauma? And they start to grow out of disconnection into a positive, secure connection. And we always want to close out with really affirming statements, so they know that it's not weakness to share their emotions, but it is strength. And we say, look at what you just did. You put your experience together in a new way. You were able to stay in a new way that is more emotionally accessible, responsive, and engaged. That is what secure bond is. The bond is characterized by moments of emotional accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement. ARE, accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement. The answer to the question, are you there for me in a secure bond, is yes, is a resounding yes, especially when you need each other in the most vulnerable moments, which is when the dragon of doubt comes for you. You are ARE. So then the team is suddenly more accessible, responsive, and engaged with each other. And you build those moments over and over and over again using the EMC process. You celebrate what they've done. You hold the camera up and you say, wow, look at what you just did. Just the way a mother does to a child when they go down the hill. The mother doesn't say like, oh, that was good. Yeah, maybe some mothers do. But if you watch a really engaged mother, the mother goes crazy, right? The mother says, wow, look what you just did. That's what we need to do with emotions. People are so worried about sharing their emotions. So the message that we want to give them is that you are competent. You can make sense of your team relationships. You can make sense of your interactions. Distress relationships make sense. You don't have to be afraid of them. Your emotions make sense. You are competent. You can deal with them and you can change your relationship. What you understand, you can shape. You can change your relationship. And team members really start to grow. And as they grow in competence, their window of tolerance for the negative emotions start to expand. And you can go more and more into the relationship repair. It really ends up with validation, a summary what happens, all kinds of recognition of what they've done. You put it on a wall. You say, look at what you just did. You describe the process and the need for safety. The need for safety increases. And for that, you have to tune into your teams, tune into your team's members, tune into their space. So a lot of what we do in EMC is really we teach you how to do that and how to work with emotions. This is very different from any other approach that deal with conflicts or any other modalities, because you are really emotionally present. You learn how to be emotionally present. You learn how to be with someone from the cognition, from what's happening in their head, from the explanation to what's happening in their heart. And you follow that emotion. The emotion will really always tell you what is important. The emotion will tell you where the team lives. The emotion will tell you what matters. And this is what emotion does. It tells us what matters to people. When you work with a team that is disconnected and has some relationship injuries, you might have to go slower in those instances. It's a difference between how far can you titrate risks for them. Are they able to actually share the vulnerability? Can they turn to each other and look at each other when they do that? So team members may get very fast overwhelmed. So you have to make sure that your lines, your pace is meeting where they are, where they can, how far they can go. But please know that what we mean is that we're not just healing the relationship, but we expect to get the relationship to the point where the team is actively growing. So that creating relationships where they can be there for each other when the dragon turns up in a way that is healing, where the relationship actually gets stronger each time they do it together. So one way of thinking about this is, if you think about attachment as our primary protection against feeling of helplessness and meaningless, what we do in EMC is we create more secure attachment. to help team members create that protection for each other. Another way of thinking about that is Alan Shore talks about the fact that proximity to an attachment figure tranquilizes our nervous system. Proximity to an attachment figure tranquilizes the nervous system. So you can really think about it literally that way. And I encourage you to think about that way, because in our work, we actually see that after bonding conversations in EMC, team members do not just deal with threats differently, they perceive threats differently. That's huge, because then you interpret everything differently, right? Emotional disconnection from people we depend on is really a danger cue for us, just like stepping on a nail is a danger cue. They're both dangerous for human beings. And I think it's worth noting that Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA, her research shows that the fact that if you put people in a brain scan machine and you submit them to rejectional cues, and this isn't even rejection by someone they love. This is just general rejection cues. Those rejection cues are processed in the exact same part of the brain and exact same way as physical pain. So I just want you to think about how disconnection from the people you rely on is a danger cue for your brain. It's registered in the same way as physical pain. And this is a physical reality for us as human beings. We're not just talking about ideas here. Emotional connection is an ancient wired-in survival code designed to keep us close to the people we depend on. It's not just a whole mixture of emotion and sentiment we're hearing. It's not just something nice to have. I mean, I hope you're getting the point that if you want your teams to perform, they need to be emotionally connected with you and with each other. You as a manager, I'm talking about. I mean, if you are an HR or L&D professional, you need to teach teams and managers how to emotionally connect with each other. This is wired into our nervous system. So when we work with a distressed team, I want to make sure that I've got all these points here. First of all, you have teams, you are dealing with teams who are more distressed. You have to expect that you get more intense negative cycles going on. Team members are more reactive. They are more easily triggered. They are more withdrawn. So everything is more extreme, and the cycles of distress happen frequent and faster. So you have to be able to deal with that. You have to be able to learn how to stop and de-escalate those things. You have to slow it down from, the attachment point of view, to slow it down so you can really tap into that emotion. And when people say emotion is irrational, there's really nothing irrational about emotion. There's nothing particularly negative about emotion. The worst thing about emotion is it's fast. And it's supposed to be fast. It's supposed to be fast enough to save your life. It has to get you to run for your life when you hear an alarm bell or run away from an image, in a dark night. So, but from our point of view, the main thing, and the funny thing is that the brain interprets the disconnection as a danger cue, as like a dragon, right? Or is a danger on the dark night. So as an alarm. So that's what you have to really understand, how quickly our brain interprets that disconnection and how much it values that connection. So definitely members regulate their emotions differently. So you got to learn how to slow things down. And we use all kinds of tools. We use our list of raw spots and emotions. We use the reconnection form. We use our voice, our presence, our continuous emotional reflection, our empathic reflection to help to create safety for people. And if you watch us to work, we slow everything down with our voice. Absolutely. We go low and slow. We talk in a soothing way. So because we are kind of like singing a lullaby to the amygdala, we reflect people's experiences in a way that orders it and makes it manageable. And it calms people down. It slows the cycle of emotional rev up. So you have to put an educational component in it as well. And when we work with a distressed team, we don't talk down to them. Like we work with them. We talk about the cycles as it's happening, and so they can recognize it and step out of it. So safety is everything, and you have to slow things down. You have to titrate your risk and and tolerate when people shut down or they don't want to talk about it or they're not able to turn to each other and share their vulnerability. But as your alliance grows and their confidence in the process grows, you start to see people making a huge change because they want to take risks. They want to be connected. So people will take risks. And you have to trust the process, and becomes easier and easier to know. You start to read their faces faster. You start to listen to them faster. You start to recognize and identify what's happening for them. So everything becomes easier for you to do and guiding them through the reconnection process. So that's the summary of what EMC can do for you and your team. If you want to learn more about EMC, I invite you to check out our website. Please email us at emc@emcleaders.com. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn at EMC Leaders, or connect with me, Lola Gershfeld, on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for watching.